I just got a text from my kid's school. They are currently conducting a practice evacuation drill. How convenient is that the text just came in while we're talking about
That's beautiful.
planning for an event, and not only planning for an event, but practicing that. I
Why
mean, how
don't why don't you just use exactly what happened? You just said, "Hey, I just got a text." And I said, "Well, I'm glad to hear they're practicing. What are they practicing for?" Did they say?
it didn't. It just says, you know what? It just says practice evacuation drill.
Yeah. Okay, this is great. This is exactly what we needed. I
Yeah.
think you must be praying a lot these days. You're on the right side of all these things.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 9 of Building Cyber Safe Communities. We're going to kind of piggyback off of episode 8 a little bit today, I think. Last episode, as you may recall, we talked about 5 questions a city leader should be asking their IT and their staff related to their cybersecurity program. The fifth one was pretty simple in theory. It's, do we have a plan? And I even said kind of bluntly that if you don't know the answer to that question, then the answer is no, right?
Right.
Yeah. So not knowing if you have a plan basically means you've never seen the plan, you've never practiced the plan. In essence, you have no plan, even if there may be one in place. So let's talk about what a disaster recovery plan related to a cyber event looks like, and maybe how we can practice that. Because what I think people really need to realize is that a cyber event is a full-blown disaster. Certainly can be.
That's right, Ryan. You've said that many times on the podcast so far, and I think everyone agrees that a real cybersecurity event is a disaster. It can have catastrophic impact to your organization, and yet we seem to treat it like an IT occurrence still, and even in our disaster recovery planning. You see people running around managing large organizations, and yet they feel like the incident response plan belongs to IT. And the only way to bring it out into the light is as you and I know, is to do a tabletop exercise, to
Yeah.
sit down and say, let's actually walk through one of these and see if we've got all the moving pieces we need to be able to respond to one of these impactful events.
Yeah, we've talked about it before, and I've always said, delegating it to the IT department is really, I mean, in all essence, setting your organization up for failure, because IT really, in its core function, is a support function of your business operation, right? We're in the public service space. We're not in the IT space. So IT supports our mission and our statement and our function of providing services to citizens. So the recovery plan or the response plan certainly involves all parties in your city, all hands on deck. So let's talk about kind of the structure of a plan, but more importantly, let's really talk about how we can practice that plan to make sure that we're successful in the case of a cyber event. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, I like it, Brian. I think it's a good topic for our listeners. As you know, we've recently conducted a regional tabletop exercise with some of our
Yeah.
members in conjunction with CISA from Department of Homeland Security. We brought in about 30, 35 representatives from some of our membership in the San Marcos region, and we spent 4 hours doing exactly this, walking through a simulation of a disaster and pausing and stopping and talking about at what point would we invoke our incident response plan, who all needs to be at the table. And it's not just IT and it's not just city leadership. You need to have a lot of people involved in helping you. And then also, at what point does your cyber insurance bring resources in that can help you get through this event?
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of services and resources available through your cyber insurance program or plan, and our members do have a cyber insurance plan that can assist them with that. And back to the event that we held in San Marcos, what I found most interesting about that, and you kind of just hit on it, was we had about I would say a 50-50 mix of job roles represented, right? We had a lot of IT folks, which, that makes sense. But we had city managers, we had some executive directors of some other types of public entities, we had finance folks, there was an HR representative, there was a risk manager, city risk manager. So I was really, really pleased with the fact that the entities that did participate recognized that this is not just an IT function. So I thought that was that was a pretty good sign that people are starting to understand this.
Right. And back to your question earlier, the elements of the scenario actually caused each one of those levels of participation to need to be in the room, right? So
Right.
you needed to have your city leadership there to say, how are we going to address these questions we're getting from the public? You needed your PIO, you needed your risk manager there, you needed your IT folks to talk about the particulars of what all they need to help triage and begin to contain and respond to this event. But then, there are city functions that are public safety related, fire and police. You've got your 911 center, and depending on the scenario that you craft, as we've seen in real life events, they can all be impacted, and their operations have to be mentioned and also addressed during this event.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and we think about, other types of disasters, and most entities have plans in place for those and practice those. Like, just like my youngest kid's school is doing that, and that's great to see and hear. But now we're talking about a cyber event, so it's good to get all of those parties involved, understanding that it is truly, truly a disaster. So let's let's talk about kind of just briefly what a plan looks like, and then let's talk about how you can actually facilitate what you call a tabletop exercise, right? Practicing that plan. What does that kind of look like from the ground up?
I think it starts with a script from leadership. You sit down and you say, all right, do we want this to be a 2 hour exercise? Do we want this to be a 4 hour exercise? Are we looking to involve external partners at this point? You may have a county function that you want to bring in that's important to your jobs or your role there. Or you may simply want to say, let's just keep this in-house. Let's start small and let's just for 2 hours sit around the table and let's bring in HR, let's bring in accounting, let's bring in city management, let's bring in IT and our PIO and legal, and let's just sit and talk about how this would look if we were to walk in on a Monday morning at 8:30 and the computers were locked up with a ransomware note on the screen.
Yeah. So having that conversation with all of those involved parties early and often is probably going to be the key to success, because I think some of us take for granted the fact that we rely on our systems so much for our daily operations, and our job functions and whatnot. And we don't really realize that until we lose some access or some functionality. And you mentioned it just a moment ago. We really think about, what I call mission critical functions of a city, police, fire, public safety, even water and utilities. But sometimes we forget about the HR function, the finance function, paying our vendors, paying invoices, but paying our employees, payroll, all of those things that if you're asking IT to say what are critical functions in your organization, they may not know the answer to that without all those department heads, all of those pieces of the puzzle being involved in the plan, right?
Right. And I think now may be a good time to tell our listeners that CISA has on their website about 14 different scenarios for tabletop exercises. These are Word documents you can download, and one of them is for local government. And it's actually the one that we used when we did the event in San Marcos a few weeks ago. And so, our members don't have to look at a blank whiteboard and start trying to come up with a script on their own. I think that the other day I sat down with ChatGPT and I said, write out a tabletop exercise scenario for a small municipal government in Texas, and it scripted out 3 pages worth of scenario and had some really good information on it about who needs to be involved. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I was always reminded of, and San Marcos reminded me of it again, is that you need someone there who's taking notes and writing down
Yes.
the time frame of what's transpiring so that you can refer to that when you look back and try to triage, could we have done better or did we implement this in a timely manner?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we can even go back to a couple of years ago, I recall when we internally performed a tabletop exercise, and we started small, something that was relatively simple, but we didn't do that great. But we did take notes, right? And we did an after action report and talked about what we did right, what we did wrong, and then we did a second one, and it was the success rate was so much better, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's
Yeah.
because we were true and honest with what we did do correctly, but what we did do wrong, and we built on that. And I think that's important when you're conducting these tabletop exercises, that you maybe don't jump into a full-blown ransomware event that your entire city is down, right? Maybe start small with a lost device, or one machine impacted, or a user email compromise that impacts their access to some asset, and then build on that. And I think that's probably a good thought. What do you think?
Yeah, I think managers of departments can do this with their own internal
Yeah.
staff. IT doesn't even need to be in the room. Just walk in, you say, okay, one day we come in and the computers are down. What would we do?
Yeah.
How does that look? Do we have a manual process workaround? Usually you find out you used to, and nobody's had to exercise it in a while, which is great. It means your system uptime is very
Is
high.
good.
But you really would like to have this conversation when the systems are up rather than when the systems are down. And I think that's the real benefit of a tabletop exercise is you get the opportunity to sit down and with some less pressure and stress, walk through how would we do this? What would this look like? And then you get to look back on it and reflect, how can we improve on that?
Yeah.
And I can tell you that, no fire drill ever goes well the first time. Those get better with practice, which is why
Yeah.
we always practice fire drills when we have large buildings with populations inside. Well, you need to
Yeah.
look at you need to look at your incident response plan the same way, through the same lens.
Yeah. Those are the times to make the mistakes, right?
Absolutely. Very well
because
said.
we because
Yeah.
like I said earlier, I mean, we can learn from those and we can improve upon those. The worst time to practice your plan for the first time is during an actual event. Um, so making mistakes in a safe environment is always a good idea. I think what we really want to drive home is that this is not something that you necessarily need to take on by yourself. There are resources available, right? We can assist with some templates for incident response planning, but you just mentioned, CISA, and we can put the links down in the chat or the notes at the bottom of the video. Texas DIR has some good resources too. MS ISAC. So there's several resources available for you to do some scenarios, some tabletop exercise scenarios, but it really is important that you understand what resources are available to you during an actual event. And I think, letting us know as early as possible in an event will enable us to activate the response plan, or the response services that are available through the cyber insurance program that you have through the pool.
Absolutely. And you make some great points there, Ryan. I'd like to go back over it though and say that they can always just reach out to you or I.
Yeah.
Email us at cybersquad@tmlirp.org, and we'll be happy to help facilitate them getting either a script or some resource, or we can actually try and help them by coming down to their site and working with their team one-on-one to facilitate this. I think most organizations that make this a priority have a level of maturity in their disaster response preparedness that really serves them well should something bad happen.
Yeah, and it's not a matter of if, it's almost a matter of when at this point. We've talked about that, so often, and especially in these episodes. But back to, the event that we held in the San Marcos area recently with CISA. Our plan is to replicate that and do that in different regions across the state. So hopefully we will be doing this in a region that's close to you. We'll be sending out information when those dates get set and time. So be on the lookout for that. If you see that and you're available to join us, we'd love to have you come in and see what an actual tabletop exercise does look like. But to your point also, if you're not wanting to wait for that, reach out to us. We're happy to have these conversations one-on-one with you and your organization to try to help you, be more successful in the event that something does happen.
Yes. And I would just close with this by saying, like we started, that if you're a city leader and you're not sure if your team has an incident response plan, then you need to ask right now, can I see it? And then make sure everyone on your senior leadership team has a copy of it. And then just sit around the table and start talking about, is this thing actionable? When was the last time we updated this? And could we do a tabletop exercise based off this incident response plan for us?
Yeah, yeah, good points. I think there's some good information today. The last thing I want to drive home, and you said it, and we've said it many times. Reach out to us, Cyber Squad at tmlirp.org. We'll place it on the bottom of the screen here, and we'll also put it in the notes. If you're enjoying the podcast and getting good information from it, we do ask that you like the video and subscribe. That way, you're notified whenever we post new content. If you have ideas about future things you'd like for us to talk about, please let us know in the comments. We're happy to accommodate any of that. And any last minute words of wisdom or anything else, Mike?
No, I would just add, Ryan, that for people who don't have the ability to sit and watch videos like this, we are on audio podcasts on Spotify, and I think we're also on Apple,
Yeah,
iTunes as well.
Apple Podcasts and Spotify also. Just search for Building Cyber Safe Communities on your favorite podcasting platform. So, well, good stuff today. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it as always. And look for maybe episode 10 coming out soon. And let us know if there's anything we can help you with. Please reach out, and hope you have a great day. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.